your Saturday. But please only do so if it's right for your body, right? If it's something that you're comfortable participating in. I promise no yoga handstands this afternoon. So I'm just going to jump right in, and we're going to start together with a brief grounding exercise. I know that when I heard these inspiring folks speak and when we broke out, I could feel, my heart start to pound, and I can feel myself inspired. I know your entire conference has been exciting and inspiring. And so I think it's a nice point for you to stop and check in. So let's do that now. Let's take note of your physical and your mental state. Do you feel any tension in your body? Maybe stress from being away from your desk? Robert and I were just talking about folks turning in their notes, right, last week. Pressures from school, being away from your other commitments. Or does your body feel relatively calm? Or does it feel anywhere in between? Reflect on if your mind is filled with new ideas or inspirations. Or is your to-do list running a loop in your brain? Or is your mind relatively open and steady? Or anything in between? So now I'll invite you to move into a supported upright position. So in this position, your shoulders are back and down, and your feet on the floor, flat if that's available to you. Crisscross applesauce looks great up there. But this is a dignified position. So we'll come into this position for many of the practices today. It's upright, it's dignified, but it's not too rigid. And let's take a deep breath in and then sigh it out together. So, can we do it one more time together? So this exercise is called the 5 sense grounding exercise. And we're going to start by looking around the room. So look around the room and notice 5 things that you see. What do you see? Bring an object into your sight. Doesn't have to be me. Notice the size. Notice the shape. Notice the color. And take your time. Find 5 different things that you see. What do you see? And now, if it's comfortable for you, close your eyes, or you can just gaze downward. And we're now going to notice 4 things that you feel. Ask yourself, what do you feel? So maybe it's the texture of your clothing. Maybe it's pressure where your body is touching the chair. What temperature do you feel? Find 4 different things that you feel. And now, with your eyes still closed or your gaze still downward, notice 3 things that you hear. What do you hear? Maybe it's something you wouldn't usually notice. Maybe it's the air circulation or noise from outside this room. Identify 3 different things that you hear. And with your eyes still closed and your gaze still downward, notice 2 things that you smell. What do you smell? Notice if it's sweet Is it strong? But find two different things that you smell. And finally, again, with your eyes still closed or your gaze downward, identify one thing that you taste. Maybe part your lips and let the air come in. Maybe you swallow. But what do you taste? And when you're ready, slowly flutter your eyes open or raise your gaze. And now let's check back in. Do you now, after that 5 senses grounding exercise, do you notice any change in your physical or mental state? Raise your hand if you do. So I see a few nods. This is a simple exercise you can do, not so lengthy, right? We methodically moved through each of our senses, but the 5 sense grounding exercise is something that I do when I walk into court, or maybe something you'll do when you walk into your next exam, maybe the bar exam, where you know when your head is in a tizzy, right? And when you're disconnected and you're unfocused. And sometimes that feels very overwhelming. You can easily just ask yourself, what do I see? What do I feel? What do I hear? What do I smell? What do I taste? Robert and I were just chatting and I was saying, sometimes when I'm really out of my mind or I'm having a conversation with someone and I'm just not engaged with them, I'll ask myself, can I feel my pinky toe right now? It's really hard to be distracted and unfocused when you're trying to feel your pinky toe. And that is a practice in terms of bringing yourself out of your mind and into your body and grounding. So I'm going to back up and just give you a little bit of information about me. As mentioned, I'm in civil private practice here in Tempe, Arizona. And I'm in my 14th year of law practice, which shocked me when I was doing the math preparing for today. I've spent the last 10 years in my current firm where I'm a shareholder. I'm biracial. I'm the daughter of an immigrant. My dad's from Manila in the Philippines. I hear you. And I'm a first-gen student, and I grew up as a free lunch kid. So mindfulness practice has been a tool for wellness and resilience for me. It began early in high school, continued through undergrad and law school, and into my first years of practice, I was basically a high-functioning nervous wreck. I described myself to my firm that way when I was doing a mindfulness exercise with my partners, and they all nodded like, yeah, that's me, a high-functioning nervous wreck. I was a perfectionist that combined deadlines and uncertainty and the uncertainty of the practice of law. Those two things put me over the edge in my first few years of practice. And emails would put me into a tailspin, and I had awful Sunday scaries. You guys feel me on that? I started procrastinating. So that was like my freeze response to panic. And I deeply believed that I had to work really, really hard to obtain what I had, which isn't always true. I would misunderstand my anxiety for intuition. And I was distracted and disconnected during really important events like weddings or celebrations or vacations. And then I ended up with an ulcer. And so something had to change to end that suffering. So through a regular mindfulness practice, I noticed a million subtle ways that I'm more peaceful and calm, that I'm less reactive, that I'm more present, not only in my law practice, but with my family and my friends. And I don't take things as personally, particularly when they're completely outside of my control. But mindfulness practice has also allowed me to embrace my authentic self. I have this regular experience of being sort of a recurring contestant on a game show called Guess What You Are, regardless of whether I want to play or not. This most often occurs with clients. My ethnicity becomes a guessing game that typically goes something like this. Firehawk, so you're Native American. No, you look Mexican. You're Asian. What are you? And for someone, my answer never seems satisfactory. And I stand there and smile. And sometimes I try to change the subject. I don't think the general inquiry is offensive. It's just how it happens that makes me feel bad. It's guess what you are, right? Not guess who you are. And I become an object instead of a person. And so mindfulness has played an incredibly positive role in my life. Sitting in stillness has helped me create a relationship with myself. It started with knowing that I am not my thoughts. I am not my thoughts. And the experience that I just described, in that experience, mindfulness has brought me to the knowing that I am more than my race, or my weight, or my title at the law firm. Mindfulness practice has led me to know who I am. And it has enabled me to practice law with an attitude of caring and compassion. So if you're experiencing suffering like I have, or I am, my intention is that these concepts this afternoon that I share with you will help. You know, the statistics for lawyers and law students regarding alcohol and drug abuse and suicide are well known, and they're alarming. And even more common than that is just burnout. So the ABA formed a task force back in 2017 that issued this report called The Path to Lawyer Wellbeing. And it says it's a practical recommendation for positive change. And there's been plenty of other subsequent studies and reports out of the ABA and other organizations. But this report concluded that to be a good lawyer, one had to be a healthy lawyer. And this report identified mindfulness meditation as a practice to minimize stress. The report said, quote, mindfulness meditation is a practice that can enhance cognitive reframing and thus resilience by aiding our ability to monitor our thoughts and avoid becoming emotionally overwhelmed. Addressing social activist issues requires such resilience. Achieving the ACS vision of multiracial representative democracy does not happen overnight. So I'll share with you a definition of mindfulness in the legal context. Mindfulness is the ability to be in the present moment, fully, intentionally, and non-judgmentally. Practicing mindfulness actually cultivates many skills and mental qualities that can be helpful to those in the legal profession, including the ability to concentrate, recognize and let go of distractions, manage stress and other emotions, and accept others openly, compassionately, and authentically. So that description comes from an organization called the Mindfulness in Law Society. It's a national organization. There's a small chapter here on ASU's campus. The point is, mindfulness is not mindlessness. It's paying attention in a particular way, on purpose, in the present moment, non-judgmentally. That last part's the part where I see a lot of challenge with lawyers and law students. There are many different types of mindfulness practices. There's meditation, which is finding stillness in the body and the mind to connect with the present moment. There's movement. So there's running and yoga and qigong and tai chi. There are breathing techniques. There's mindful listening, and there's even mindful eating. So many times I sit down to have lunch, and it's usually in front of my computer while I multitask and work. And before I know it, the whole meal is gone, right? I don't recall eating it. I don't even know how it tasted. How many of you have experienced that? You're like, oh, here's my sandwich, and now it's gone. This is a funny story. I did a mindful eating exercise one time with a group. I was participating, I wasn't leading. And so the instruction said, bring a snack. And so they're like, okay, now's the time to get your snack out. So I got my snack out, and it was wasabi covered peas. And they're like, okay, now smell your snack. Now put it in your mouth, but don't chew it yet. And by the time I was done, like tears were running down. So if you do mindful eating exercise, not wasabi peas. So these different types of mindfulness practices are all ways, different ways to draw your awareness into the present moment. Just to know, just to realize that your mind is distracted, that is the practice of mindfulness. You will not perfect this. So our bodies have a biochemical response to stress. We all are familiar with, fight, flight, freeze. It's that automatic biological response to stress. And the issue we have now, and particularly with lawyers and particularly with these specific activist practices, you're in a constant state of stress, right? And when you're in the constant state of stress, brains have a problem. They have a difficulty returning back to the resting state. So the vagus nerve is part of the parasympathetic, lawyer, not a doctor, nervous system. It's the longest nerve in the body, and it runs from the brain to several of your most important organs. The vagus nerve, it's really hard for me not to do that, like what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas jokes. So just know it's there, but I didn't do it technically. So the vagus nerve down-regulates your nervous system. And mindfulness practices such as breathing exercises or humming, we're going to try both of those in a minute. They stimulate the vagus nerve and it helps calm us and it brings us out of the fight, flight, freeze response, and it puts you biologically back in the resting state. And then there's the two parts of the brain that you've also heard about that are interesting. So there's the prefrontal cortex, right? That's that executive functioning part of the brain, the part of the brain that responds to logic and language. And then there's the amygdala, and that's the part of the primitive limbic system. And that's what responds to biological triggers. So the amygdala triggers your fight, flight, freeze response. And summarizing this very, very simply, do I have doctors in the audience? Because saying these words terrifies me. So saying it very, very simply, stress shuts down your prefrontal cortex. That's the executive functioning part of the brain. That's the part of the brain for reasoning, for organizing, for planning, all the really important stuff for lawyers. And having that part of the brain inaccessible due to stress is obviously super problematic. And so mindfulness practices can bring you out of that automatic response and back into the lovely prefrontal cortex. So let's try some mindfulness practices. We've already experienced the 5 senses exercise. That's that practice that allows you to get out of your thoughts, out of your mind, and connect back into the present moment by triggering each of your 5 senses. Let's try a breathing technique now that's called diaphragmatic breathing or belly breathing. This is probably the mindfulness practice that I do the very most. And there's a really rad video on YouTube with Elmo from Sesame Street doing belly breathing with Kobe Kelly and Common. And I wanted that clip, but I didn't get it. So look it up, belly breathing with Elmo on YouTube. Those of you who have kids, it's amazing. So belly breathing uses your diaphragm to get more oxygen into your lungs, and the vagus nerve runs through your diaphragm. So deep breathing expands and contracts the diaphragm and massages the vagus nerve, and it signals to your nervous system to down regulate. It tells your body to come out of flight, fight, freeze, and into rest. So I did this even as I was standing here. So Robert's introducing me and I hear my own name and your heart starts to pump, right? And I was standing there to be present, to be able to connect with you, to give this talk and practicing belly breathing. Usually when you're experiencing stress, you breathe out of your chest, right? You feel all of a sudden this tension here, and it's like that hyperventilating chest breath. Diaphragmatic breathing pushes that air into your belly, again, stimulating the vagus nerve. So for this practice, we'll do it together with 5 breaths, again, only if it's right for your body. I'll just pause because breath is my thing. So I came to mindfulness through yoga. I'm a yogi. But I realized that some people have trauma around breath and breathing. So if breath's not your thing, if that's the case, don't do it. Or if you just don't want to, Don't. So I'll explain it all first, and then we'll do it together. So we'll go back into that comfortable seat, right? We'll sit with our feet flat on the ground if we can, and our back upright. And so that you can notice the difference between stress breathing and belly breathing, when we do this, we'll have one hand on our chest and one hand on our belly. And we're going to imagine, this is where the Elmo like kid stuff comes in, right? You're going to imagine that your belly is like a balloon. So when you inhale, you're going to imagine filling your belly with air. And when you exhale, you'll gently use your muscles to push the air out of that balloon. You'll relax your chest. So your hand on the chest should be still or more still than the hand that's tracking your diaphragm on your belly. It's not an ab workout. You're welcome. It's your belly's meant to move just in and out naturally as your breath moves in and out. So we'll inhale for about a count of 4 and exhale for about a count of 4. Do what's best for you. All right, let's try this together. So hand on your chest and on your belly, focusing on your belly. You'll exhale completely and inhale through your nose. 2, 3, 4. Exhale. 2, 3, 4. In. 2, 3, 4. Out. 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 2, 3, 4. And you can rest your hands. Thank you. So raise your hand if that feels different than how you normally breathe, right? Just really, focusing, speaking for myself, I find myself, particularly in social situations, like sucking my abs in, like sucking it in, right? And so that becomes sort of my resting state, is this terrible, like sucked in motion, and you can't belly breathe that way. So the placement on your hands, the placement of your hands really highlights that this is maybe a different type of breathing than what you're used to doing. The beauty of belly breathing, which is why I say I do it all the time, is that you can do it all the time, right? So you don't have to walk around like coming into court with your hands that way. That's just, to train you up. But the more you do it, the more exercise your diaphragm is getting, and the easier breathing like that becomes. My husband's noticed, he can hear the change in my breath, right? So, we're having a disagreement in the kitchen, and then he notices and he's like, what's wrong? You're belly breathing. So it's for me become this awareness in my body when I know that I feel that tightness, and it's this immediate tool to bring me out of that fight, flight, freeze response. There's a Rumi quote that I love, says, "Don't let your throat tighten with fear. Take sips of breath all day and night before death closes your mouth." I didn't mean to get dark there at the end, but take sips of breath all day. I love that. Okay, so we'll do a little mindful movement. These things always go longer in person than when I'm like practicing in my kitchen, Robert. So just be like, Lex, you're done. So mindful movement, I talked about like Qigong, Tai Chi, even running, right? You've heard of runner's high. Mindful walking is really neat. So it's meditating as you walk, just being completely tuned into your body every step you take. Some people do that barefoot, right? Mindful meditation. So I'm going to invite you to join me in just a short yoga pose. It's a heart opening pose called cactus. Does anyone in the crowd have a yoga practice? Is this completely new? Okay. So so look at me or look in this direction. So we'll sit upright again, right? With your spine straight. And you can bring your hands in front of your heart center. Sometimes this is referred to as Anjali Mudra. And from here on an inhale, you can draw your arms out to the side. So I know, bonk your neighbor, get friendly. And then you can keep your arms parallel to the floor, but just bend at the elbow. So you're bending at the elbow, forearms parallel, your palms are facing front, your fingers are wide and engaged. And you'll inhale, and on that inhale, you'll broaden your chest. So you'll feel your shoulder blades engage and pull together. And then if it's available to you, you'll bring a small bend to your upper back. So you'll bring the bend and sort of gaze upward. And then let's just take 3 belly breaths here. You can release your hands straight and then back to Anjali Mudra if you'd like. You look beautiful doing that, you guys. Thanks for doing that together with me. So it's a heart opener. It's a physical engagement, right? Bringing you again back into your body, like the 5 senses exercise. And it's really hard to ruminate in your own anger and frustration. Like when I'm doing that at my computer, that looks like this. It's really hard to do that when you physically are opening your heart, right? Sometimes I'll do a quick cactus pose just to shift gears. So I'll have a gnarly call or a really hard, conference and shut the office door and bring myself back into this open position rather than the closed off, frustrated physical position. All right, they're getting more and more fun, you guys. So this one is called humming bee breath. This can be used also to reset and for mental clarity. The vagus nerve also runs through your head, through your jaw, throat, and down into that space under your collarbone. So the vibrations of humming also stimulate that vagus nerve and create a soothing, calming effect. There's a few variations of hand placement here. Ultimately, it's just humming. You could just hum. I'm going to pick a hand placement that's like the least embarrassing for us doing this in public and like live streaming this. So I'll demonstrate it first and then we can do it together for 3 breaths. So what you're going to do is you're going to take your pointer finger and you're going to use it to close the cartilage, like la, 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 right? Like use it to close the cartilage in your ears. And we'll close our eyes or we'll take a downward gaze. And when we're inhale, our ears are open. And when we exhale, we're going to close that cartilage. And then with our exhale, we're going to make an out loud hum sound with our exhale. And then we can release our ears and inhale, and then plug your ears again, and you're humming the exhale out. So it looks like this. And then when you inhale, unplug. And you'll feel it. You'll feel the vibration through your jaw. It's in your head. That's why you're plugging your ears, and then through your throat. And that's the vagus nerve being stimulated. So if you're not too cool, join me for this one and Google it because there are some really neat hand mudras that you could do. So let's do it 3 times. So upright position again, right? Your shoulders are back and down. Your feet are flat on the ground. You're dignified, but not too rigid. And then you'll keep your ear open until the exhale. So let's just exhale completely. Inhale. Release. Inhale. Final one. And release. So raise your hand if you got like a tickle in your teeth. I mean, you really could feel the vibration happening. So again, with my firm, I taught humming bee breath, and we were at a firm retreat, and there were drinks after the mindfulness practice, which really doesn't line up. But we were out, and it just warmed my heart because all these lawyers are like to each other, and I was like, it's not meant to be like weaponized, right? Like this is I have a 5-year-old, and he does that. He's like, la, 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 I don't hear you. I'm like, that's not humming bee breath. I like that one. So you can do it really loud and hard and really stimulate the vagus nerve in your throat. A lot of folks hold that tension, right? So that's why belly breathing is so cool too. You're not breathing into your chest, but you'll notice that, like, and maybe it's just our physical, like, always typing posture or texting posture, but a lot happens up here for lawyers, I notice. And so that cactus opening pose, that stimulating the vagus nerve to, think about that. Like you're blocked here and your brain is disconnected from your body, right? So yeah, do some humming deep breath. Other ways to stimulate the vagus nerve. So you can also use a cold ice pack. So like 15 minutes or 15 seconds, you'd be frozen. 15 seconds, just having it there. Warm tea. So that stimulates right the back of your throat. My son has this like adorable thing called a warmie. It's like this stuffed animal and you nuke it and then it's a warm pack. Yeah, Splashing cold water on your face. That's like the classic. Everyone does that. We don't know why that's a thing. I wear too much makeup to do that, but that's helpful. And this one that was a surprise to me, but even chewing gum. So you see athletes do that sometimes, right? Chewing gum loosens the tension in your jaw and stimulates the vagus nerve. So another portable mindfulness practice that I want to share with you is something that I call mindful moments. Jon Kabat-Zinn has a quote saying, even the briefest moment of silence is both a way of coming into the present and a way of moving out. So mindful moments are found by actively finding stillness throughout the day. For example, when you're commuting. When you're driving, same thing with the eating, right? Have you ever driven somewhere and you're like, wow, I don't remember anything. How did I get to this drive, right? The next time that you're driving or even taking public transportation, I feel like there's some East Coast people here. So I was acknowledging that exists. I'm from Arizona, so I don't know what that means. Turn the music or the radio or the podcast off. Turn it off and just experience, observe what's happening in that commute. The act of driving is it is physically engaging, right? It's nuts that you could be completely disconnected from that responsibility. That's literally life or death, and we don't remember driving somewhere. Another mindful moment is just gazing out the window between tasks, right? The one that I think is funny that I use all the time is the 30 seconds that I'm nuking something in the microwave. So how many times you're like throwing it and you're like, oh, it's like taking so long, right? Like you can sit there flat-footed, shoulders back and down, and just breathing for that 30, 45, 1.5 minutes, whatever it's taking to nuke whatever you're having for lunch. So these are quiet moments, even seconds, that I find throughout the day, and they add up to peace. Can have a really long, gnarly day. But if I'm finding these seconds in between all of these various challenges, all of the different directions that I'm being pulled in simultaneously, I can end the day still with a sense of peace. So I'd like to shift gears a little bit and offer some advice as you finish your legal education and begin your careers in the law. So not all of us have the privilege to become, for example, voting rights attorneys. Sometimes our paths lead us elsewhere, and our first job, or maybe all of our jobs, aren't the exact practice that we originally dreamed of. I love my practice. I love my clients. I love my firm. I love my colleagues. But the majority of my clients are homeowners associations. I'm a community association lawyer. And I must admit, that was not my vision when entering law school. So I found ways to be an activist in day-to-day life outside of my actual daily law practice. And I've found this in a variety of ways, right? So through affinity groups like the Arizona Women Lawyers Association or the Arizona Asian American Bar Association. I've found it through organizations like the ABA's Judicial Intern Opportunity Program and the Mindfulness in the Law Society that I mentioned. And I've also found places and opportunities to make positive influence. So I'm in charge of student recruitment for my firm, and I do that to ensure that the firm values diversity in hiring. And I volunteer for the State Bar's Appointments Committee for that same reason, for diversity in appointments. And so I share this approach with you as another way of being resilient. That if you don't end up in these beautiful practices that you're hearing about over the weekend, that you still find a way to be connected, to be activists, to be resilient. There are many different ways to make a difference in legal and public policy to ensure that the law is a force to improve the lives of all people. Your law license, your education, and your network enables you, no matter what your practice looks like. I just wanted to give you permission, right? I took a mindfulness in law teacher training course that I'm trying to recruit Robert for. And I was amongst these amazing people, like the people that are speaking and that are practicing in maybe what you're endeavoring to practice in. And halfway through the program, I felt a bunch of shame. I felt like, oh, am I not like worthy to be, with these folks side by side when they're, fighting the good fight. And I think that this idea does speak to resilience in that way, that it might not be your first job. Maybe it's the next transition. You're hearing about these really interesting paths that people take to where they ultimately end up being, but maybe it never is. And so it's your license, it's your skill set, it's your network that will still let you make a difference. Okay, so I'd like to close our time together with a 12-minute seated meditation. And when I first started meditating, I was like, 12 minutes, like you get 30 seconds, right? For my lawyers in the house, a 0.2 meditating, like sounds ridiculous. But neuroscience studies have shown measurable attentional benefits when meditating for 12 minutes at a time for 5 days a week. So they did, clinical studies on it and like mapped people's brains. So it's not every day. It's not hours on end. You literally have the opportunity to change your brain, to improve your wellness, and to create the ability to relate to stressors in a healthy and life-sustaining manner. And it's only 12 minutes away. So let's try it. You guys have been such great sports. So 12 more minutes. I'm going to talk you through it. I'm going to talk you in it. I'm going to talk you through it. And then I'm going to talk you out of it. I've done a bunch of seated meditations before where my eyes are closed and I'm like, is it over? Like, did everybody leave? I don't, so just follow my cues. So I'm going to invite you to come again to an upright seated position. It's dignified, but not too rigid. Your shoulders are back and down. Your feet are flat on the ground if that's accessible for you. And you're going to bring your attention to your body. You'll ground yourself again by noticing where your body makes contact with the chair or the ground. And now bring your attention to your breath, again, if that's comfortable for you. And you'll soften your gaze or close your eyes if you'd like. And in doing that, relax your face. Unclench your jaw. As we settle into our meditation together, I'll read a quote from Ajahn Chah. Do not try to become anything. Do not make yourself into anything. Do not be a meditator. Do not become enlightened. When you sit, let it be. When you walk, let it be. Grasp at nothing, resist nothing. So I'll ring the bell to start our time together. If your mind has begun to wander, that's okay. Just bring your attention back to your breath. Breathe slow, long breaths to expand your belly. Notice the sensations of your body as you slowly exhale. If your mind has begun to wander, that's okay. Just to know, just to realize that your mind is distracted is the practice of mindfulness. You will not perfect this. Your mind has begun to wander. That's okay. Do not try to become anything. Do not make yourself into anything. Do not be a meditator. Do not become enlightened. When you sit, let it be. When you walk, let it be. Grasp at nothing. Resist nothing. If your mind has begun to wander, that's okay. Just bring your attention back to your breath. Now start to bring your awareness from your body and your breath back to your surroundings. Notice the sounds in the room. Slowly raise your eyes or flutter them open if they've been closed, and I'll ring the bell to end our time. Thank you. How was that for you? Who felt agitated during the time? Yeah. You're like, is this the longest 12 minutes? Did anyone notice your mind distracted? Great. That's the practice. That's the practice. So sometimes mindfulness practice feels a little impossible or overwhelming, like you think you're meant to be folded into a pretzel at the top of a mountain, right? And I hope that what I've shown you today is that that's not what it is. I mean, that is a form, right? But there, it's so much more. It's so much more portable. It's so much more accessible. I grow to look forward to those 12 minutes. I mentioned that I have a 5-year-old at home. So, finding a sacred 12 minutes is amazing. Sometimes it's in my closet, but that cushion is pretty portable too. So, I'll just close and allow for some questions, and just again express my gratitude that you would allot for this topic to be part of this very important conference. And thank you for all of the wonderful participation and being game to try some new stuff out. So thanks. Everyone's asleep, so there's no questions.
And it's how do you, so much of it basically forcing yourself to do it.
Yep.
Maybe that's the wrong idea, but there's an element of discipline in making this into something a habit. How have you been able to make yourself do these exercises and dedicate this time, even when you might not want to?
So my strategy with actually sitting, right, which is a bigger time commitment. When I schedule sitting, I schedule the 12 minutes, right? And I have better control of my life in the morning before it goes completely off the rails. And that has to do with like kids stuff, but also practice stuff. So my practice, a lot of my meetings are in the evenings. And you'll never know what's going to happen in court during the day. So my strategy to actually commit to sitting is to do it first thing in the morning. And I actually pick it over exercise. So, but it does go really nicely. If you already have an exercise routine, you can build mindfulness into that routine. But that's why I like to teach belly breathing, is that is what I use the most. Sometimes life is so hectic and I'll get away from my daily sitting practice, but that belly breathing, it's become sort of a automatic reaction. Or like I mentioned, like my husband, like he notices me doing it when I don't even know that I'm self-soothing, that I'm bringing myself out of that reactive state. So that's the toughest part. Is it's like exercise, right? It's prioritizing it. It's prioritizing your mental health and wellness. What I see with folks that study it and start practicing, and this is in yoga too, once you feel that the million little subtle shifts, you're hooked, right? So all of a sudden that 12-minute sit becomes a super top priority because you're noticing that you're calmer with your kid, or you're calmer with opposing counsel. I was getting lit up last week by opposing counsel, and I'm sure they were just having a hard day, right? And instead of that, before, when that would happen to me, I could physically feel, I could feel my ears go hot. I was ready to say the next thing, right? And this experience was wild. The person on the phone was losing it. And all I could think of, like, man, they're having a bad day. And that sort of separation between an auto response to anger, I can only accredit to more regular practice. I'll also say, find what works for you. So I'll challenge you to keep trying to sit, right? Even if it feels very agitating, keep trying to sit. Sitting isn't turning off your mind. That's impossible. You're alive. But if that doesn't work for you initially, find other little gateways, all of the other things we tried, right? In order to touch into your body and bring yourself into the present moment. Like, can you feel your pinky toe? Just little things like that. Yeah. Yeah. So I know that you had some breakout meditation sessions, and in one of those you did a body scan. Body scans are amazing for that, going off to sleep. So you can use a body scan not only to check in with, like, hey, where do I have tension? But you can use it, I don't know how you let it, but you could use it as like relax. So starting at the top of your head, relax your eyebrows, relax your jaw, right? Relax your neck. And you can do the body scan that way. There's also a practice called yoga nidra. It's sleep yoga. It's really great. So, and there's tons of free stuff online to find a yoga nidra practice. And then all of those amazing apps. So I get super distracted. Like, I want to do a plug for tech. Like, I want to do a plug for technology, but I also deeply believe that everything you need to do to practice mindfulness is free and in your body. So if you need a shortcut or you need a hack, like, tech is awesome too. So there's tons of apps. You've heard of like Calm and Headspace. They're awesome. There's meditation timers. So sometimes even just timing yourself in meditation can be distracting. Like, when we all closed our eyes, like that first minute and a half feels long. And so, yeah, so use tech. Tech can help as well in terms of, particularly with sleep and sleep tracking. Yeah.
Earlier, but I think that's been kind of interesting and modular. When I first started here as a 1L, we had this presentation about mental health and specifically the drastically high rates of substance abuse among law students. And, I sat through that seminar and it's about mindfulness, and then being in law school, I definitely don't judge. I do drink alcohol, but almost every, firm event, club event,
Yeah.
every bar review is like a happy hour. Everything seems to really be sponsoring a lot of substance use. And so I wonder if that's the same in the actual practice.
Sure.
How do you think us as a legal profession can, move towards healthier and better?
Yeah. There's so much truth in my jokes. Yeah. So paying attention to the prevalence of alcohol, particularly in the practice of law, is something that the bar has been doing a lot of. The state bar, right? And so you'll see that, and it's something that I'll challenge organizations to do as well. So the Arizona Women Lawyers Association just had our big wine and cheese event. It's our signature event, and it's wine. But what they've done in honor of that is they've created this really fun mocktail for every event, so that you get the exact same fun experience of drinking something that's yummy and fancy with fruit or on fire or something, right? But it doesn't have to be alcohol. It's gonna take a shift with the firms as well. So I lead my firm's mentorship program, and just last night we had a mentorship happy hour, and it was going great, but there was a pregnant woman, and I remember being in those shoes, and I was like, and she was great and social and having a fun time. But I turned to the other sponsor and I was like, hey, we got to figure out different events. So clearly that type of abuse or that type of use, right, is not being in the present moment. It's not. It's a different way to take you out of it. And if you do that too often, it's a dangerous way. So same here, like no judgment either. But that's just one more thing to pay attention to. So to your point, in terms of, how do you make this as a part of your life? How do you make a regular practice? If you're finding yourself coming home from school or coming home from practice and you're like, I got to get that wine, right? Or even in the morning, I got to get that coffee. Just take note, just like with everything else, just take note. Yeah, great question. It's just something everyone is grappling with, and it's going to take some commitment from organizations and firms alike to acknowledge that, you don't have to have alcohol at every event to have fun. Free food works, right? Yeah. All right. Thanks, everyone.
I think we have our judges panel that starts at 4.